Good morning, good morning, good morning, our friends on LinkedIn and on Facebook Live. It is your friendly face over here at CRL, Maresa Friedman, and I'm welcoming you this morning to our live stream, The Effect of Respect. Today we're going to go over a couple of different things that are, I think, really, really important to pay attention to as we go into the middle of Q1. And one of the reasons we wanted to do this is we spent a lot of time for the last 90 days talking about all the mistakes, not to scare anybody, but to just bring forward kind of the practical truths of the cost of disrespect. And so to counterbalance that, what we wanted to do was to showcase companies that are doing it right, talk about different types of respectful cultures, and more importantly, bring some experts to the table to have this conversation. So I'm really, really excited to do this today. If you are watching the live stream, as I see 3 of you so far are, go ahead and comment hello and let us know where you're from. But first, I'd like to bring in our Executive Director, Greg Ward, to say good morning to everybody. Here we go. Let's get in Greg. Hey, Greg, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm in sunny San Diego, and I know a lot of folks are suffering under cold and horrible weather. So I really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much.
Oh, wonderful. We're so glad to have you here. And our special guests today are going to be Executive Coach Mark Schall. I want to say, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Greg. And we have a new team member to the Center for Respectful Leadership, Kierstin Rielly. And so Kierstin is joining us, and Mark as well. Mark is coming in from, I believe, New York. So let's bring him in. Good morning, Mark. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Marisa. Good morning, Greg. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Mark.
And good morning, Kierstin. How are you guys? Good?
Good morning. Great. Good to be here.
Good. We were joking that, like, even though it's so much fun to talk about all the mistakes and mess-ups, to probably bring some balance to the conversation, we should probably talk about things that are going right? I mean, I think it's way funner to talk about drama, though, I feel like, personally. That's just me. So when we started looking at a couple of things, what we looked at were some statistics around workplace culture. And what I thought was really interesting is that it said 58% of people, employees in the workplace, say that they would leave their jobs right now today if they could find a better corporate culture. And so what we tend to look at with the research and the dialogues that we're having is, what are examples of that culture? What are experiences that we've had that have contributed to that? And I think that's a really important thing to touch on, but I'll kick it off with Greg. I think we spent so much time talking about all the mistakes. It's kind of exciting to talk about people and companies that are getting it right. Right?
We really should be talking about that, because when we come off as all doom and gloom and everything's bad, then people shy away from the truths that we're trying to get to, which is that respect and respectful leadership really, really are effective, and they really do work. And so we wanted to talk today about some of the examples that we've experienced personally around respect and respectful leadership in large and medium, even small organizations. And one of the ones I want to talk about is, and I can't name them by name, but I can tell you that they're a large corporation. They've been around for many, many years, and they work in the government contracting space. I've been serving them as a vendor, as a trainer, and as an executive coach for nearly 20 years. And I've always been treated by them with the utmost respect. They value what I bring to the table. It's always a dialogue with us, and I feel truly respected and honored and valued by this organization. And I know that translates to the folks who work inside of it as well. And it makes an enormous difference when people feel respected. Even a vendor like me, where they could just say, yay, nay, do what we say, but they don't. They include me in their decision-making and development of the work that I do for them. So it is a pleasure to work with that kind of organization. And guess what? I'm more likely to put in the extra effort for them. I'm more likely to go the extra mile. I'm more likely to translate my enthusiasm for that organization to everyone in that organization that I work with. So as we often say, respect is contagious, and it certainly is in that organization. Mark, I know you've worked with many different organizations. I'm wondering, is there one that comes to mind for you that you can name and tell us about?
Other than the Greg Ward Group, let's see.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one client of mine that was a client company of mine, which of course, naming notwithstanding, but an electronics company, basically in the lighting design business. And they had a very, very respectful culture. And you just felt it when you walked in. You know, people are always happy to see you. They're happy to see each other, the way people pass each other in the hallways, even the way they deal with conflict on their teams. There was always an expectation of it being respectful. And I got a sense of a very high sense of respect that people had. And they looked for that in their interview and selection process as well. You know, somebody who's going to fit with that culture. And I think one thing, you know, they say that a fish thinks from the head down. Well, I think it also smells lovely from the head down, if you will. You know, and this particular organization, its owner and founder, actually hesitated for quite some time to open the cafeteria on the campus of this company, because several local businesses thrived on the business by the employees that they got at lunch hour. And he didn't want to interfere with that. He knew that that would hurt the local community restaurants and food businesses. So for a long time, there was a cafeteria they had on campus that they never opened. So I think, that kind of value, that kind of respect for people, that kind of inclusion, you know, clearly from the head down in that organization, and it permeated everywhere.
That's really cool. Just, he didn't have to think about them. He didn't have to concern himself with them whatsoever. He probably, it probably cost him more to think about them and to hold off and than to open the facility.
Well,
isn't that cool?
There's unused space, right? So that's you know, wasting money, and the lost revenue too, because the company gets the revenue from the employees, on all the other benefits too of employees remaining on campus and not going out to eat. Right. And he was willing to give that up. The other thing too that I learned when I was consulting with them was that at the time, 40 years or so, I'm not sure how many years, something like that they've been around, they had never had one layoff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
They lay off consultants and outside people first.
Mm-hmm.
And their priority was on making sure that the people that take care of us every day and work for us every day have their jobs.
Outstanding. Yeah. Outstanding. Thank you. Kierstin, I want to officially welcome you to the Center for Respectful Leadership. You're brand new with us. How are you doing so far?
Thanks, Greg. I'm great. It's good to be here. I'm excited to be a part of the team and learn and contribute how I can.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, rumor has it you also have an example of a respectful culture?
No doubt. So my first job out of college, I really just hit the jackpot, and it's a very small organization. It was the local Chamber of Commerce, and I was literally 22, like, you know, fresh off my bachelor's. And the CEO, the executive director, this had been like his third career. He was kind of on his way to retire, 65, 60. I don't know how old he was exactly, but there was a pretty substantial age gap between the two of us. And he treated me as if I had 20 years of work experience. Wow. And he always came to me for my opinion. And he really valued, not so much my youth, but he valued my opinion. And so he would come to me, he's like, "Hey, Kiers, I'm in a bind right here. Can you help me out with something?" And that meant so much to me. And I felt very safe. And I felt very safe to contribute even a wrong answer. I knew if I had a wrong answer, it'd be like, okay, well, maybe next time she'll get it or whatever.
Yeah.
And as a result, I stayed at that organization for far longer than I should have for my career development, because I was so happy and respected. And it really, really meant a lot to me. He ended up retiring, and I left shortly after he retired for other reasons, but he's still one of my good mentors.
That's outstanding. Even though you were fresh out of school, he valued your perspective, and you brought a different perspective that maybe he didn't have. And that was worth it.
He realized that, and he was able to see. And you know, for a Chamber of Commerce, especially, there is some sort of there's sometimes like an old boys club.
Oh yeah.
You know, and here I am, this 22-year-old woman, and not fitting into the boys club, and he really valued that and wanted my opinion more. That's
respectful leadership right there. Thank you. Outstanding.
But isn't it funny though, Greg, that like what we consider to be respectful leadership, and I'm sure people that are listening, you know, we've got some listeners here and on LinkedIn and YouTube, they're kind of, doesn't this seem really basic and simple? And I think people would be really surprised. because I think people don't understand, right? There's all of these different things that we do in different cultures. So people talk about great corporate cultures, and then they talk about respectful cultures. And I think there's a really important distinction between a culture that's respectful and a culture that's somewhat cliquey, right? If anytime I walk into an early tech startup, right, the joke is, how many more guys in plaid am I going to see with their skinny jeans and loafers and wearing glasses? You look around and no one in the building is over 35, right? And so what you recognize is, I think the balance of having a respectful culture is one where people can challenge each other respectfully or have tough conversations, right? Because I think the mentorship is one aspect of it. Which brings me to something that I thought was really interesting, Greg. You had mentioned some just baseline numbers. I wanted to know if you would share that with everybody. I can bring up that graphic.
Yes, please. Thanks, Maresa.
I'm going to talk through it because I thought it was really interesting.
As we've been developing our programs, our e-learning programs, we really wanted to give some concrete examples of cultures where respect is part of the culture itself. It's built in, and how it impacts the organization's bottom line. So what we did is we did a comparison between two big box stores. For legality's sake, I'm not going to mention them by name, but I am going to tell you that we all know of these big box stores. And so Big Box Store A and Big Box Store B were both founded in the same year. They both have roughly the same number of stores in the United States. One of them has more stores overseas. The other operates only in the US. Now, look at the growth rate, and all of this data is pre-COVID. The growth rate of Big Box Store A is roughly 10%, whereas Big Box Store B is roughly 3%. Now, okay, that's fine. They are competitors and maybe they have different strategies and so on and so forth. But what I want to do is start to look down into the deeper numbers, such as the Net Promoter Score, which is basically a measure of customer loyalty, how much they're going to come back to the store, and also how much they're going to refer the store to their friends and neighbors and colleagues and so on. The NPS score for Big Box Store A is 79%. Now, in retailing, that is huge. That is off the charts good. And as far as Big Box Store B is concerned, it's negative 4%. That is not good. By any industry standard, that is not good. And look at your employee retention rate. In the Big Box Store A, you're seeing 94% of employees want to continue to work there after 1 year. That particular store has a 1-year probationary period. The other store does not. Look at the turnover. The turnover at the other store is 44%, which is basically industry standard when it comes to retailing. So overall, there's a huge difference when you've got employees feeling like they want to stay versus employees who can't wait to get out of there. Why is that? Why is that? So we look at one other metric that's called the Employee Net Promoter Score. Would they recommend a friend or family member work at that store? At Big Box Store A, we're looking at 70%. That's very, very good. Again, for retailing, that's awesome. That's really good. Look at Big Box Store B. It's not very good. In fact, it's in the negative. So that's not healthy. And usually that is an indication of a culture of disrespect when it's that low. When the employee Net Promoter Score is that low, that's an indication that the culture is disrespectful. Take a look at the theft rate. This is another key indicator. At Big Box Store A, employee theft rate is 1.9%, which is really the lowest in the retail industry. Whereas at Big Box Store B, we're looking at 33%, which again is a retail industry standard. And then I'm sure you're all familiar with Glassdoor. And it's a terrific website. It's about transparency. It's about employees getting to talk about their employers in a way that they feel safe. And you'll see they have a particular score called Culture and Values. It's a 1 to 5 score, Likert scale. And it basically, at the Big Box Store A, it's 4. And at Big Box Store B, it's just 3. So at the end of the day, this data shows us that if you strive to develop a culture, an organizational culture of respect, treat people with respect, value people for what they bring to the table, as Kierstin was talking about and Mark was talking about, and having a wider perspective for all stakeholders, you're much more likely to have significantly positive impacts on your organization overall. Which was a rather long-winded way of saying respectful cultures really do work.
I just thought it would look great if we had some graphs and charts and numbers, right? I feel like people can get behind that.
People resonate with that, yes.
Hold on one second. I'm going to go ahead and clear up the feed. Just give me one moment. Forgive me, guys. I'm also like producing on the back end. So a couple of things that I thought were interesting about the statistics that you shared, Greg. And I wanted to ask everyone's thought about this. I've been doing a case study of a woman by the name of Molly Moon Nitzel. Has anybody heard of her by any chance? She advocates for pay transparency in her organization. So they own a very boutique ice cream company, and every single person from operations to office, everybody knows each other's pay. And so her thought process behind it is when they started going towards this process, she was trying to tackle this problem of systemic pay inequality. And basically what they did is they brought forward, hey, this is what everyone's making. And to her surprise, a lot of the team members said, hey, these people should be making more. They didn't have any of these crazy conversations about, well, that person, I do more than them. It was a really diplomatic dialogue. And what I thought about that was, you have to have a positive culture and a respectful work environment to even talk about money. What are your guys' thoughts on that? I think it's really fascinating. It's a little hit for me, but what do you guys think about that?
Go ahead, Mark. What do you think? I can see the wheels turning in your head.
Yeah, give me the question again.
So it was in order to tackle pay inequality. There's a woman who has an ice cream chain. She's Pacific Northwest, not surprisingly, in California.
And they all know each other's salaries.
Yeah.
Everyone knows each other's salaries. Everyone knows her salary, the marketing people, down to the store to the janitor level. But the reason I bring that up is because here was this greater problem. She already had a great culture. People love making, who wouldn't love making ice cream all day? Fancy ice cream, by the way. I might mention it's like $10 for a scoop of ice cream. But what are your guys' thoughts? Like, you would have to have a great culture to have that type of trust with one another, don't you think? I don't know.
Yes, certainly. It's funny. I think it's a great idea. I'm sure that there are some challenges associated with it, like anything else, right? It may have some side effects, but I really like that as a creative way of tackling that challenge. And I'm just reminded, I had worked once for a very large consulting company, and I remember an email went out from the personnel department to everybody saying, please submit your salary and bonus information to HR, so we make sure we have it all aligned, by such and such a date. And there was like 2 executives that hit reply all, and the whole company. So right, and like, oh my God, what a disaster! But this kind of says, okay, right? What if everybody knew that? Now, of course, you can't just suddenly switch to that, right? Like that was. But if your culture already supports that, and people coming in already know that that's what you value, I could see that might turn some people off and be like, I don't want to work for a company that does that. And that's actually fine, because they're just not aligned with that cultural value of the company. So they wouldn't be a good fit. Right?
There's something, sorry to interrupt you, Mark. There's something we've learned from our colleagues in Ecuador around what's called informational respect. And informational respect is basically saying, hey, we know, and this is what the head of Salesforce did. We know there is pay inequity. We know this to be the case. So we're going to spend a lot of money figuring out exactly where it is, and we're going to remedy that. And we're going to make sure that everyone is paid fairly across the board. And I know it cost them at Salesforce millions of dollars to do that. And the first time they did it, they thought they had it solved. And then they looked at it again a year later and they realized, nope, they hadn't solved it. So they had to do it again. and it costs them a lot of money. But if you look at the bottom line numbers at that company, retention is terrific. It's really, really high. Conflict is there just like it is in every other organization, but the ability to de-escalate conflict and resolve it and manage it effectively is much more practiced there than at many other organizations who just say, if you guys don't get along, one of you is out of here. And so there's a lot of bottom line impacts to just saying, yeah, we're going to be transparent. We're going to be fair. And there's a big fear out there that you're going to generate a huge blow up and everyone's going to be jealous of each other. But the research tells us, as long as there is transparency, as long as there's perceived fairness across the board, people often accept, yes, the CEO should be paid more. Yeah, everybody kind of agrees with that. The question then becomes, is the CEO paid so many more times than others that it becomes a little bit like, oh, really? Seriously?
Right.
So like hundreds of times more than the average employee. That's a problem. And if people say, fundamentally, I think people get what is fair and what isn't. I mean, most practical, normal, decent people understand what's fair and what's
I like how you say that, practical, normal, decent. Well, I would love to hear Kierstin's opinion on this, because I think as women in the workplace, we've all worked with or for potentially people that we actually had to, like, I don't know if anybody's had to train like someone that was brought in above them, but that happened to me when I was working in the venture capital world pretty heavily. Like every time I would come in and have to train a C-level executive, I would just lose my shit a little bit. I just said it. I said the S word. But Kierstin, what about you? I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Because I'm sure you might have had a sneaking suspicion, or you've had that situation where there's a colleague who you're pretty unmatched with. And then there's things that they say in indicators that I'm like, he's making more money than me. Like he just got a new Audi. He just did this. He just did this. Like, meanwhile, like I feel like I'm, list building, right? If anybody's ever had to go to ask for more money with a detailed 20-page PowerPoint, you'll know what I'm saying. But Kierstin, I'd love your opinion on that. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, Maresa. I have been in that situation, not a ton of times, but a handful of times that really resonate with me. And especially to the point where somebody is brought in at a higher level than I am, and then you have to train them. And you get it. They have more experience than you and whatever. But at some point, like, you're like, well, I know a little bit more about this organization than you do. Like, and then the kicker with that is, like, 6 months later, 8 months later, they come back to you and keep asking questions. It's like, no, shouldn't you have known this by now? And how much money are you making?
And that to me is the fun about talking about these things and how they impact, right? Like the average tenure of Molly's company has been like 6 years, right? Even with millennials and younger staff members. And so what I think that translates to is, because it is on the table, and she said it hasn't been easy, right? Some people come in and they want to overstate their value. And there was a big discussion about, well, what about the people that are thinking versus the people that are doing? And so we both agree that those things can take, brain work is definitely hard, right? I don't know what my husband does all day, but I know there's a lot of spreadsheets and yelling. And I know that that's definitely mentally taxing. However, I would say that having to look camera ready and smile all day long and be like Mary Sunshine is also tough too, right? So I think it just depends on how you look at that.
Maresa, I don't get the impression that that's too tough for you.
I mean, really?
Oh, yeah, I don't really get the impression that you struggle to do that. I think that comes pretty naturally.
I mean, doesn't it though? Doesn't it look natural? I would say. I did want to share something really fun, Greg, with, we had a company in San Diego, and what's really interesting is typically their hires are right out of college. Now they're seeing tenures of about 7, 8, and 9 years. Amazing. And so what I thought I would share with you, since we're talking about these great cultures, is a couple of things that they make very clear on their website. They are not afraid to lead with the type of culture they are. And I'd love everyone's commentaries after we look at this together, because I think this is where people are going. I think this company in particular was ahead of their time, because they realized that the right people were going to fit in with this culture and they were going to go for it. So a company called Gap Intelligence. They are based here, and it basically starts with, hey, we care about our clients and help guide them to smart business decisions through data, insight, and relationships. And right after that, which I thought was really interesting, because this is on their hiring page and their culture page, they tell you that they are a values-led company. And so that's kind of where they start with, and they hire accordingly, right? So they value trust, communicate like hell with positive intent, right? Willingness, do your best, never stop learning. Ownership, build a cathedral, not a wall. Passion, you are inspired by life. Professionalism, A+ work, don't be a jerk. So they're putting it all. And what I love about this is when you start to see how people are responding to this, they have their charity that they do. What I thought was so cool about it is the stats that they put, right, is how much money they donated to their foundation and how much time they've done for their community. So if you're going for a job at this company, this isn't just great imagery and marketing. This is like, and they have these amazing holiday cards every year, right? So a couple of years ago, they did one based on the 80s. And they're not all young bucks, but what I thought was really interesting is how very clear they are about who they are and what they want and how they go after that. So I would love to hear, because I see a lot of people have really, vague things scrambled on walls, or they have these really great, things that they say, oh, we believe in respect or trust. And then, no one trusts each other. It's a little bit of a cluster behind the scenes. So I would love your guys' commentary, because I think intuitively this is where corporate cultures are going, especially as they're being more remote. You have to communicate. Yes. You have to be professional. But I kind of love that A+ work, don't be a jerk. I think it's really, really funny. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Especially because you're a local company here in San Diego.
I love it. I absolutely love it. The trends I've been seeing is that a lot of corporations are doing what we call virtue signaling and value signaling. And they're writing all these beautiful values and these beautiful virtues, and they're saying to the world, they're doing heavy duty marketing on all of these things. Unfortunately, it's just window dressing. They are not walking their talk. And the moment you look at their metrics, their turnover, their retention, their conflict, their complaints, their lawsuits, that'll tell you whether they're really walking their talk. And so when I heard you say the very first specific data you gave was that their retention rate is really high. People are staying there 6 or 7 years, especially most of them coming right out of college. These days, that doesn't happen anymore. People are moving around every year or two or every 18 months. So that's incredible. That tells me right there that they are walking their talk, and I love it. And, people might be listening and go, gee, wow, I want to work for them because they sound really cool and they sound like they understand. And most importantly, like they get it.
No, they totally do. I'd love to hear Kierstin and Mark as well, like what your thoughts are. Because I think it's really cool to see like a company just put it out there. And it's a little bit like maybe like online dating, like you either like it or you don't. There's no maybe. There's I think it's a very definitive way to make sure that you're building an intentional culture. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, I think walking the talk on that stuff is so important, and people could see right through it when you're not walking the talk. I know many companies that put values out there, right, and they don't walk the talk internally or sometimes even externally. The company that I was telling you about before is my example of a company that really values respect. I would even, they of course did walk their talk, and I would even hear as employees would be problem solving things on their team, whether it was interpersonal conflicts or not, I would hear them refer to the principles the value principles that they work out there. Like they might be at an impasse and it's an interpersonal conflict that started as a result of some project they're working on. And they're like, okay, wait a minute. Are we taking care of the customer first right now? That's like our number one value. Are we doing? No, we got stuck on our own stuff about let's put you and me aside and let's take care of the customer. What do they need? And to hear people proactively doing that, or to hear a third party come in and go, guys, I hear this is what's going on. What's our number one principle? Right? And that would guide all of those conflicts and their daily way of operating.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just comforting to know that here in our own backyard, right, Kierstin, there's companies that are doing this and they're building this way, and they know that it's probably going to be a harder, hiring might take, knowing the twitchiness of, well, I'm an elder millennial, but like, younger millennials or Gen Z and whatnot. Like, I think it's really interesting to talk about, because I see a lot of the times when you go to an About Us page on someone's website, right, Kierstin, you worked at the chambers, so it's like, the world's most sad paragraph with like, you know, a line about some award that they might have won like 15 years ago. And so I think intentional design is really important, don't you, Kierstin?
No doubt. And I think the layout like that and how they've laid their values out, like the phrase "don't be a jerk" is pretty forward. You know, it's pretty like, okay, this is who we are. And to Mark's point earlier, I think that attracts the right people. And I think, you know, like Maresa, you said, you're going to have a harder time finding the right people. But once you find them, you will keep them 7-8 years. And me, like, I am a millennial, like to the T, like for my age. And if someone was to tell me like, oh yeah, the average employee stays 8 years, I'd be like, wow, what are they doing right? Like, why, you know, and clearly there's like career advancement opportunities for somebody. Like, no one's going to stay in the same job for 8 years, you know, so they're moving people through the pipeline and they're living by these values that is, you know, very front and forward on their website. I think that's great.
Yeah, I wish more companies actually took the time to really be intentional about what they want and not like faux culture. So, you know, I want to be really clear, like faux culture, to me, I've always joked, like, you can't pay me less because you have wine on tap, and, you know, cookies in the break room, right? Like the free food thing, you know, a lot of people look at like Google, for example. And I was like, yeah, what do you think about that now? Because so many people took lower rates of pay because of all of these benefits. And now we're all working from, you know, conference room B, in my case, which is the bedroom, right? Like I'm in conference room B all day. I'm not getting my free food from the chef or the personal training or the dog grooming. I'm not getting all these soft benefits that were supposed to be of value. And so now I'm at home working more. I don't get those benefits. So what's interesting to me is how are all these cultures that really banked on all of these things that they were reeling in people? I think now what you're seeing is now that they know that they can do things remotely, I think we're going to see some shifts of people really jumping into cultures that are actually positive, that are paying them what they're worth, right? And that's an interesting discussion in general, right? Because I
think it is. I think we are going to experience a sea change. I've been reading a lot about this and listening to experts, and having lived in Europe for many years, they went through, you know, over the course of 100 years, a lot of turmoil, a lot of, and their focus on lifestyle and work and finding more balance between the two. I think that's where we're going to go when COVID is finally done and we return to the new normal. The new normal is not going to be you and I putting in 12 to 14-hour days for little pay because we're working at this cool company. We're just not going to do that anymore. And I think that's a positive development. Absolutely. So I think we're going to see a sea change in companies all over the place, which means they're going to have to be more transparent. They're going to have to be better at taking care of us if they want us to stick around. Because, you know, quite frankly, there's, for those of us who have experience and knowledge and training and education, the world is our oyster. There's still plenty of companies looking out for really qualified people. It's, you know, unemployment is high in many sectors, but I think we're going to bounce back fairly quickly. So how do you make your organization be that more balanced instead of that drive, go kind of organization? There's one other thing I wanted to add, and I'm sorry for going on so much.
There's someone's just edifying you. They're saying facts. I'm not sure who it is, but someone just commented. They said facts, Greg. So I wanted to call that out. Okay,
so there's a wonderful book by Dr. Robert Sutton called The No Asshole Rule, and if you get it, he's a professor at Stanford, so he can write a book like that. And his point is, don't be a jerk. Don't be an asshole at your organization. And our organization should not tolerate assholes. And in fact, we should make sure that they don't stay around very long. And he has a number of commitments that the organization should make and an approach. How do you handle these people and so on and so forth? And it's funny, when I went to write my book, I looked at his work about that and I said, okay, how could I tell a story about somebody who was being an asshole, who realized that was not a good way to be and who was able to change? And so that's what my book is. The story is all about. if you boil it down.
So devil's advocate here. So you're talking about a guy that wrote a book on no a-holes. Got it. I'm not going to say the whole word.
Oh, come on.
But you said the S word.
In your book, Greg, you always talk about influence without intimidation.
Right.
And you also talk about that respect has nothing to do with being nice.
That's right.
So if I can't be too nice, but I can't be an a-hole. What is the middle ground? Like what is the intersection of a leadership style that is influential without intimidation, respectful but not overly sugarly sweet? Because I want to be clear here. I think we've all walked into faux hospitality before with our clients and our partners.
Oh yeah.
And went, eek, or like just you kind of like pull back. Anybody ever pull back if someone's too sweet? Like I do. I kind of I'm like, why are you so nice? But
it's like the used car salesman who uses your name one too many times, smiles too much, and compliments you too much. You're like, oh, don't do that to me. So essentially, it's practicing the golden rule: do unto others as you want them to do unto you, and the platinum rule: do unto others as they would have you do unto them. Together, working in concert. That's essentially what I'm saying. So as a respectful leader, sometimes you need to be very direct with your team and give them direct feedback that no one would say is nice, but they would say you've done it in a way that is respectful. And that's being, as Brene Brown says, vulnerable as a leader, but also being clear. Being clear is kind. So kindness, I think, is part of respect. And you know, niceness, okay, nice is a nice to have, but respect is an imperative.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of being nice, I wouldn't be me if I wasn't going to mention that we've come out with a bunch of amazing online learning programs. I'm just going to take a second to speak to those because I know that people have asked, like, what are these programs? What's the deal? Like, what's Greg doing? I get a lot of what's Greg doing. So I thought I'd explain what Greg is doing since,
Thank you.
You know,
I'm not always asking that question. What is Greg doing? It's got a different tone to it.
But he usually says, what the hell are you doing?
Oh my God. So guys, if you're just tuning in for the first time and you're going, what the heck is Maresa talking about this morning? And what is Greg up to? Isn't he running the Greg Ward group? And I would tell you, yeah, of course. But we spun up the Center for Respectful Leadership in 2019 as a way to bridge the gap for, you know, people to have access to information that maybe you're not thinking about respect in a particular way. So a couple things to note about the learning programs that we have. 100% of the people that take these programs go, oh my gosh, I understand immediately what's going on. And this is not like a, oh, feel good, touchy feely. It's really understanding the neuroscience of respect. And 96% of people said, I'd recommend it. 4% of people just took it just for their own kind of benefit. And so what we created were 3 different types of programs that would allow for someone that wanted to invest in their own leadership or kind of learn how to lead a small team or create belonging in their organization. And so with the rollout of this, what's really cool is you can take these on your own timeline. You can take your time, you can go through this process. And I know for most of us, the thing that I love about the programs is that Greg kind of talks about the elephant in the room, which is most of us that have had to take training of any kind in the last year, it's like being a hostage, right? So he kind of talks with that idea of like, hey, we're here to learn something. And I know some of you might be here to check a box, but I also know some of you might want to understand a little bit more about this topic and category. So if you check out our website, it's respectfulleadership.org. You can learn a little bit more about these 3 programs. And they're really, at least in my opinion, we have spent so much time talking to people and leadership in different spaces. And I want Greg to speak to this a little bit as I bring him back in, because I think it's really important. We've got all kinds of people just going off on the live stream right now. Greg, I think people are commenting how much you're on track with everything that you're saying.
Thank you.
Teaching you how to act right. I mean, I think what we're seeing is people can get behind this and people can really attach themselves to this because this thing, it seems so basic, but it's really important. And Kierstin, I'm going to bring you back in as well. Go ahead and speak to that, Greg.
I think people are hungry for respect. I think we've gone through a challenging period. The whole world, not just the U.S., the whole world is still going through an extraordinarily challenging period. And sometimes when we're under stress, we shove respect and respectful behavior to one side, either because we're so stressed out, we revert to our 3-year-old selves. I do too. I'm a human being. I fall into my own trap sometimes, and I let my amygdala rule my behaviors, and that's unhealthy, not only for me, but for my relationships. So what we tried to do with the courses is just kind of lay out the neuroscience of respect and disrespect and how it impacts us on an emotional level, and how contagious these things are, and how they can be very positive and be very negative in ways that we haven't thought about before, and in ways that help people go, oh, I get it now. I totally understand why I'm having so much trouble working with this person. It's because I've lost respect for them. So how do I win that back? And so we just wanted to help people understand in a very kind of engaging, they're very colorful, they're very interactive, they're not preachy, these courses we've developed. We really love them. We've had some wonderful people who helped take our content and turn them into really engaging, informative, and interactive programs. And we absolutely love them and adore them. And I hope everybody will too.
Yeah. And the great news is they're not the cost of our regular programming, which
Nope.
is, I won't say publicly because it scares me. But on the plus side, I don't know, five-figure anything is terrifying. But I think what we really wanted to do was to create some accessible programming. And I think people can understand that respect is actually like free. You can give that. You don't have to spend $100,000 on a culture initiative, right? Because ultimately, you have to learn the impacts of that. I think that the biggest takeaway from me in all of these things is not realizing when I have a bad experience with someone, we have, filters aren't just for Instagram, right? They're for experiences. And what happens is we come back to that table with that filter saying everything that person says to us, we're hearing it in that tone of that bad experience.
We use the metaphor of the sunglasses, where people put on sunglasses and they see each other through these lenses, and on the lens it says respectful person or disrespectful person.
Did you have them there? Did you have them ready?
Of course, I have all my props here.
It's just like, that was so sly. Mark, did you catch that? It was like arm out of reach.
I was going to say, when people put on their sunglasses, I'm sure they don't look half as cool as Greg does when he takes those on.
So I think we've hit a couple of really great points today, which is one, right? We know that typically people are going to jump from a culture that's terrible, but if they can find something better. But I think for a lot of people, they don't know how to find that social proof. They're not sure, like, do I believe the glass door? Do I believe that? And so there was a couple of really interesting things, when they ask people, when people are interviewing, right? I talked to a couple of recruiters for really large companies, and they said pretty much more than half of the people, when they ask them, well, what would make you leave your current role? And they're like, they treat me poorly. They treat me terribly. Even if this place is as bad, but maybe 10% less, I'd still go there. And I think that's it's a little sad, but I think it's true. And I think if we've seen anything in the past year as a result of the pandemic, right? If you think about early pandemic, remember those articles that were coming out where moms were getting fired because maybe they lived in a studio apartment with their children and they couldn't keep the children quiet. And the employers were saying, well, you can't be quiet. And then that shift of people just being on national television, right? The CEO of a really large company was on a live stream and his son would just not leave the room. And finally he just said, okay. And he put him on his lap and he just kept going with the interview on CNN. And I actually love that because it's normalizing real life, which right now, real life for me personally is typically sharing conference room B with my husband, children in the office, on Zoom. And we're constantly checking to make sure that we're not walking in and they're playing whatever game on their phones, right? They've gotten really good at it, by the way. But I think we've all gotten a little bit more patience, I think, for one another.
People are cutting each other some slack.
Yeah,
they really are. I'm noticing that. Even with my, really buttoned down corporate clients, they're a lot more relaxed. They're a lot more informal with each other. They are cutting each other some slack because they know they've been there themselves. They've had the dog or the kids jump up on their lap. They've had crises at home during the middle of a meeting, and they realize, this is just normal, the new normal. And so I think it's a good thing. I really do think it's a good development.
Yeah. And I think, the more that we can highlight these opportunities for people to connect with one another in an authentic way, have good conversations, have hard conversations in a respectful way. Like I know personally, I've watched some colleagues of mine really struggle with saying, like, I can't handle it. I said, well, you need to communicate because I can't read your mind. No one can read your mind. Right. And to his credit, I will give Greg extreme credit because we had a meeting, I want to say a couple days ago, and I woke up in the morning and I said, this is a dark day. I'm in a bad mood. And he's like, well, why don't we push this to another day? And instantly I was like, okay, He gets it, right? And I think there's this really cool mix of vulnerability that is coming from men and women, by the way, in the workplace. Because we've had that conversation the other way as around, where Greg might be exhausted from a long day of facilitating. And so the grace of one another and communicating, I think, is really cool. But what we see from that positive effect is, I was doing some studies on productivity rates. So there's like 65% increase in productivity where companies can speak to one another respectfully and handle crucial confrontations and conversations. And I think that's a really positive thing for us. And you'll see that impact, right, on retention of top talent, because people aren't going to leave that culture, right? Like we saw with Gap Intelligence.
I want to give a shout out to my dear friend, Mark. Mark and I have known each other for a very, very long time. And there have been times over the years where I've called him and I've been in breakdown, absolutely broken down. And Mark has talked me off the edge, at the same time asking me powerful questions that help me have insights into how I might have contributed to the problem. So Mark, I love you, my friend, and you are so good at what you do. And I want to tell the world, you are the #1 coach in New York City, according to, what is the name of the publication? Influencer
Digest. Yeah, they named me the #1 coach in New York City for 2020.
Oh my
That
God.
is so freaking awesome.
You're so
If I was going to choose what year I'd want to be the #1 coach in New York City, and I would choose a better year than 2020. 2020 is not a very good year for anybody, but I'll take it. I'll take it.
I'll take it. Well, I think it's just so fun that you could have that type of relationship, because I think a lot of times people are, I think that the elements of positive workforce culture and that vulnerability and having the ability to say like, hey, I don't got it. Right. Like that's the biggest thing sometimes, is like, hey, I don't got it. And Kierstin, I've only known for a short period of time, but even in our conversations, she knows me to be, I'm a very direct person, but I try to warn everyone that I'm a direct person, because it could be, and I can adjust a little bit, but ultimately, it doesn't serve us to dance around things. And what I've learned from watching, some of my colleagues is, oftentimes the issues that they keep having in the workplace are because they refuse to have the hard conversation. They refuse to actually say, hey, you know what, this is bothering me, right? And I kind of joke, like, I have one colleague that sends emails at like 1, 2, 3 a.m. in the morning, and I never know. It's like, if I see it, am I supposed to answer it? And then when I see it, like, I'm annoyed, and so, the solution was really simply like, I'm just charging my phone in the other room. Right. But also, I wonder for you guys, how are you trying to kind of show support for your colleagues that are maybe having a tough time right now? Because I think, they joke, what was the joke that I heard yesterday? It was something about, you can count on your hands the people that you can be vulnerable with, but who are the people that you really call, or what are any experiences that you can give or advice to people that are like, you know what, maybe you work in a terrible place, and the only thing you can control is yourself. What is some like maybe resiliency or some things that you can do to like internal leadership to help people if they're in a difficult spot? That'd be great to know. Tough challenge, but I did have a mentor tell me, if I immediately feel like I need to fire off an email, to write the email, remove the recipient, and then just let it sit in my drafts and set a timer for 2 hours and then reread it. And if in 2 hours it's okay, then send it. And I would say 99% of the time, I never send the email because it's so angry. But I'd love any practical tips you guys could share as well.
Sure. I really like that one. And I think you also need to realize too, that communicating and writing, we lose a lot of very important nuance, visual cues and vocal cues, right? So I think that's why that's super important. I think another place it begins too is with self-care. If we're stressed and not taking care of ourselves, then our perspectives, the way we perceive what people said, we're going to be easily triggered and fire back, right? But if we're feeling okay, we're taking proper care of ourselves, we're eating, we're sleeping, we're exercising, our bodies are, in line. And I think we neglect that a little too quickly. And I think that even some people, when they hear that as a suggestion, like, oh yeah, the self-care thing. But it's really, really important. You have to be able to use all of your brain's resources to problem solve. And when your body isn't working right and you don't have enough sleep and you're not eating right and all that kind of stuff, your resources are going elsewhere. and you don't have what you need to be really creative in your problem solving, you're likely to fly off the handle, not be respectful, and those sorts of things. And I'm working with a client right now. I never thought it was going to be about self-care. It's a one-on-one personal life coaching client. Never thought it was going to be about self-care for her. Started out as, some stuff in her business and whatnot. And the main thing that we're doing now is all her self-care routine. And it's just made such an amazing difference for her and a whole shift in her life in ways that we never expected. So that would be my number one recommendation. It's like, take care of yourself first. Cover your own. What is it? Place your own oxygen mask on first before you help the person next to you.
Mm.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Mark. What about you, Kierstin?
Yeah, I would echo what Mark said, because I know that when I am coming from a place of high stress or high anxiety, I'm going to be so much quicker to snap or to not be as respectful as I could be if I had taken care of myself. I think that's huge. I think it's also like knowing you're having a bad day, and just if you can take an hour off, go outside, take a little bit away from it. And then on the flip side of that, if your colleague is having a bad day and you're having a great day, ask what you can do to help. Like, hey, is there anything I can take off your plate for you? Like, you'll probably do this for me eventually. So let's just have a mutual understanding here. And let me help you. Help me help you. Like, what can I do for you to make your day even a little bit better?
And that's respectful and kind as well.
Yeah.
And if I wanted to offer a tip that I'd learned about, the Navy SEALs have something they call box breathing or foursquare breathing. And the idea is, the Navy SEALs, they're the ones with special ops. They're going into highly dangerous situations, and they have to manage their emotions. So what they do, the technique is called box breathing or foursquare breathing. They inhale on a 4 count. They hold it for a 4 count. They exhale on a 4 count, and they keep the air out on a 4 count. And so I use it a lot. I must admit, it really helps me settle down in the moment. I play tennis a lot. When I'm getting all frustrated and I'm not playing well, I'll go in during a moment, a break, I'll do foursquare breathing, and my game gets better. It's a great technique. If you haven't learned about it, it's really simple to do. It's just about inhaling, holding, exhaling, and holding, and on 4 count. Easy to do. It makes an enormous difference.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. It's very fancy. It's a Navy SEAL technique.
Yeah.
I just want to be like, I learned this great technique from the Navy SEALs. I think that's a great conversation starter. That'll be the topic of our next live stream.
All right.
Breathing through chaos. Well, guys, we're coming down here to the top of the hour, and I want to thank those of you that have been on. We've had a couple people on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube just hanging out with us and rolling with us. And I think the biggest takeaway from today is, when we're in these stressful situations, remembering like what we want to create for ourselves and our companies, right? And I have to give Greg credit. He is literally surrounded by women because I've staffed him with an all-female team. That was accidental, by the way. It just happened when I mentioned this idea of respectful leadership. And are we not surprised that the majority of your team is like elder millennial women? Like I'm sorry, we're bosses. I'm just going to put that up there. But I also wanted to touch on something that Mark said, and I also want to make sure that if you're watching, that you catch this in the replay. One of the things that Mark said was talking about the tone of emails, right? And I tend to see an email and freak out because I'm assigning my tone based on a filter of how I believe that person is communicating to me. We started the Respectful Leadership Forum on an application called Clubhouse. Now, for those of you guys that are watching, when I first mentioned this to Greg, he goes, I don't get it. And I go, well, think of like an interactive podcast, right? And the thing about what is really cool, and I'm putting in Greg's handle so you guys can join us, we can invite you to our club on Clubhouse, is it is an audio chat-based app. So think of what we did today, minus the cameras, and you're hearing our voices. And what's really cool about that is that every piece of social media today, right now today, you can have somebody sub in for you. On Clubhouse, you can't. You're hearing the words from the people themselves. And so what's really great is about once every other month, we do a really great group event currently we have more than 600 people that are members of our club on Clubhouse that come in. We have leaders from London, Nigeria, like all over the world that are having this conversation. And we want to invite you guys, if you guys are on Clubhouse or you need an invite to Clubhouse, go ahead and comment on our thread. We'll try to get you invited into the platform. It's still invite only. But the biggest thing that we've seen in the forum is the majority of people want these positive conversations. They don't know how to have these conversations. And that's really why the center is here. The center is here to provide space for that. And I would encourage you, if you're not on Clubhouse and you want to have conversations or even just listen in, I mean, they'll bring in some heavy hitters and listeners, you know, like with Elon Musk the other day. But if you're like an 80s baby like me, they had MC Hammer on. So it's this really funny time to interact with people from East Coast, West Coast, all over the world. And I would encourage you to join our forum on Clubhouse because I know we're going to be doing another event soon. That being said, join us next Friday. We have a Reclaiming Respect solution session where we have one of our advisory council members. It's literally like free coaching. You can come on, state your problem, and they'll try to coach it through you live. That is not going to be streamed publicly. That is on a private Zoom. So if you want that, go ahead and comment, invite. And with that, I guess we'll leave everybody for today, guys. What do we think?
Thank you so much, Maresa. This was so much fun.
Always. All right, everyone. Bye. We're going to go ahead and disconnect.
All right. Thank you,
everyone.